Right. Welcome, everyone, to the Power of Plants. My name is Megan Rowe. I am a registered dietitian and manager at St. Jude Wellness Center. And I actually created this presentation originally for a group of cancer survivors through a collaborative that we're a part of for Orange County. And we got so much good feedback from it, from the survivors themselves, from their family members, from just various people who were there working in the building, that I decided to teach this to all of you, because it's not, while the presentation that I'm about to give you is kind of cancer focused on plants and cancer, it really relates to all of the immune system in totality. So whether or not you have cancer or risk thereof, or that's of interest, we're still really talking about the power of plants for immune power, for immune function, and how that relates to cancer, but how that relates to basically your body fighting off anything. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So our agenda, we're going to talk about plant benefits in general. We'll talk about what is plant-based. There's a lot of confusion around that. And what I consider to be plant magic. We're going to talk about some special foods, how to create more magic out of the plant foods that you're eating, and so on and so forth. So we'll start with a few stats. There's a significant inverse relationship between eating phytonutrient-rich diets, aka plants. So phytonutrients only come really specifically from plants. So there's an inverse relationship between eating a lot of plants, a lot of phytonutrients, between having high levels of those phytonutrients in your blood, and risk of all cancer. So what does that mean exactly? It means the more plants and phytonutrients you eat, the higher the levels of those phytonutrients in your system. Phytonutrients are vitamins and minerals for the most part. The higher the intake and the levels are, the lower your risk of cancer, period. Okay. Up to 80% of cancers are driven by insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is directly related to our fiber intake, to our glycemic intake, to plants, our plant intake. Protective elements in the world of cancer prevention include selenium, B vitamins, vitamin D, carotenoids, chlorophyll, antioxidants, flaxseed, alliums, and sulforaphane. What are these things? These are phytonutrients. These are vitamins and minerals and plant compounds that are really only found in plants or in animals that eat specific types of plants. So alliums are garlic, onion, shallot. Sulforaphane comes from your crucifers like kale and broccoli. Carotenoids are in your bright orange, yellow, and red fruits and vegetables. So these are all protective, meaning they help us to fight off whether it be cancer or anything that's attacking our immune system. Risky dietary elements, so things that create an environment that puts you more at risk for cancer and other immune issues, are low fiber intake, high sugar intake, high intake of processed meats, and an imbalance of omega-3s and omega-6s. And omega-6s come from seed oils like canola oil, grapeseed oil, sunflower oil. Those are your omega-6s versus omega-3s are in your flaxseed, like the actual seeds themselves, and in fatty fish. So when we have an imbalance of those things, we create a really risky environment. So this all just kind of paints this picture of plants are very important in the function of your immune system and how strong your immune system is, and in preventing cancer. And kind of what I think really hits home is there has been some really good research showing that diets high in these protective elements that you see here and low in the risky elements that you see here are projected to be able to decrease the risk of most cancers by 60 to 70%. So that is a huge amount of power that your diet has over protecting your immune system, making your immune system incredibly strong enough to fight off all kinds of infections, and strong enough to fight off genetic mutations that turn into cancers. 60 to 70% risk reduction just by eating lots of plants and not eating a lot of junk food. So how do you get this fighting immune system? And fighting, I spelled with phyto. I thought that was very clever. But again, phytonutrients, what are these things? They are the natural compounds in plants that protect the plant from its environment. So basically, phytonutrients are the plant's immune system. They have an immune system too. They have to fight off bugs and pathogens and protect themselves from various types of weather and soil imbalances. So they also have their own immune systems, and phytonutrients are what protect them. They are made up of things like carotenoids, polyphenols, resveratrol, most of you have probably heard of if you're red wine proponents, indoles, phytic acid, flavonoids, glucosinolates, antioxidants. These are all just various types of phytonutrients that you will find in plants. And all plants have a different mixture of all of the above. And this is just a very short list. There's lots of different phytonutrients out there. These are just some that I thought some of you may have heard of before. These phytonutrients protect the body from free radicals. So free radicals are something that are created in the body when we're exposed to bad things. And think of it like rust, where if you have water, like in a tailpipe of a car, and it's exposed to air and water and light and heat for too long, it starts to rust. And then that tailpipe doesn't work quite as well. And it might kind of build up over time and get clogged up. That is this oxidative damage process from free radicals. So they're kind of rogue cells that we don't like. Phytonutrients help protect our body from that process. They help get rid of those free radicals. They help fight them off, and they help to slow down that rusting process, if you will. So when that's happening over and over again, when we have lots of free radicals and lots of oxidative damage going on in our body, we create inflammation. Phytonutrients help fight the inflammation. So not only do phytonutrients help power fight those free radicals and stop them from creating that oxidative stress, but once the oxidative stress happens, which it will because we're humans and we live in an environment, the phytonutrients also have processes of helping to reduce that inflammation and getting rid of that effect of the free radicals. There's also a DNA component, especially to cancer, but to a lot of different types of immune issues, where we have damaged DNA, and that kind of starts to metastasize into a cancer if the environment supports it. Phytonutrients can help prevent DNA damage from even happening, but then once it does happen, which again, we all have some DNA damage that happens throughout our lives, it helps to repair it instead of allowing it to kind of keep mutating and become this mutated cell. Phytonutrients in general strengthen all of our immune processes. They are the ingredients that create the recipe for a truly functional immune system. Phytonutrients prevent the reproduction of damaged cells. So we're going to have damaged cells. That's what happens as we age, but we don't want them to get bigger and sort of attach to other cells and create more and more damage as they go. We want to get rid of them out of the system. And that's what phytonutrients help to do. Phytonutrients also have processes that help balance our hormones, and imbalanced hormones can be an underlying factor in autoimmune diseases, but also in hormone-related cancers. So how do we eat enough phytonutrients? What are we supposed to do here? If you walk away with only 3 thoughts from this webinar, I want you to just remember that you can eat enough phytonutrients by aiming for 3 different colors of plant foods every day. So red grapes, green broccoli, and white onion. There's your 3 colors, right? The variety, because the color itself, the pigment, is where a lot of the phytonutrients live. And so you're going to get different phytonutrients from different colors. 3 colors a day. Strive for 5 cups minimum of fruits and vegetables per day. So 3 different colors, 5 cups total minimum. You can have more. And lean heavily on crucifers, alliums, and bitter foods. Crucifers are your foods with big leafy greens. So that can be kale itself, where we're actually eating the green. It can be things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage that are surrounded by big leafy greens. Brussels sprouts are a crucifer. These have that sulforaphane that I mentioned. They're very, very protective of the immune system. Alliums are the little guys that live underground, like onions, shallots, fennel, garlic, and they're kind of wrapped in their own little packages. These are also very, very powerful. They have something called glucosinolates that are powerful for the immune system. And then bitter foods, think radishes, radicchio, kale, grapefruit even. Think of the bitter, the better, should be your phrase. And think of it truly from this perspective of, if you are a gardener, for instance, if you ever grow arugula, you'll notice the bugs don't really bother the arugula. that bitter taste, the bugs don't want it. So the bitter flavor is very, very protective from bugs and critters eating that plant. Again, it's its own protective mechanism. So when we eat those bitter compounds, we too are getting that protective mechanism. So leaning heavily on those three categories of plant foods, what does that mean to lean heavily on them? At least one of them every single day. And the more, the better. So for instance, I always, whenever I make myself a salad for lunch, which is most days of the week, I try and throw in something bitter. So I might have a spinach salad, but I might slice up a little bit of radicchio, or I might also throw in some radishes with that spinach salad so that I know whenever I'm having a salad, I'm having a bitter in there. Alliums. I try and cook with an allium every single night for dinner, whether it's sauteed garlic and onion in whatever we're having, or onion or garlic sprinkled into a seasoning. So kind of just playing with those three categories, 3 different colors, 5 cups, and you will meet your phytonutrient needs. Okay. So let's move into, what does plant-based mean? This is such a frustrating topic for me, because if you look at all the headlines that are out there that talk about plant-based eating and it's so great for this and it's protective of that, but if you look into the nuances, everyone talks about plant-based differently. Sometimes plant-based means vegan, no food, no animal food whatsoever. Sometimes it's more along the lines of pescatarian, where it's no animal foods except for fish and egg. Sometimes it only includes also dairy as an animal product, but no actual meat. And then a lot of people will also use plant-based as a term that means omnivorous. They do eat meat and animal products, but they're eating very small portions, very limited amounts of them. So their diet is based on plants with a little bit of animal protein sprinkled in. And that's kind of this picture you see here on this slide on the right, is it's mostly plant foods, as you can see there, but there's some chicken, thrown in there, and we don't know if there's maybe dairy in those sauces. So what even is plant-based? And unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you, because my response would be is, when you are reading a headline, when you are reading an article, when you are looking at a company that's promoting themselves as plant-based, read into the details of what they mean, because especially when it comes to research, they'll show this great data of this group of people got these amazing results from plant-based, but it included dairy. Oh, okay, so we can include dairy, but this other group over here got amazing results and they were strictly vegan. So, how do you balance that out? And let's look a little bit deeper into that. This was a really cool meta-analysis. It was huge. They looked into, I think it was like close to 1,000 studies doing this meta-analysis, and it was done in the Middle East. So some of the names of their dietary patterns were slightly different than what we use, but in general, it showed some really cool information. And what they were looking for was, what type of diet is significantly associated with high risk of breast cancer, with low risk of breast cancer, and maybe perhaps neutral. So any dietary pattern you see there with a red line was a significantly increased the risk of breast cancer. Green decreased the risk, and blue there wasn't really any outcome. So your Western dietary pattern, basically how most of us eat, the standard American diet, very, very processed food, definitely red line to breast cancer. Mediterranean, green. Healthy dietary pattern was both green and blue. They found like kind of a 50-50. I think honestly, because healthy dietary pattern is so vague, that there were some studies that defined a healthy dietary pattern very differently than others. So either way, it wasn't a significantly bad risk, but sometimes it was neutral. Dirty keto, meaning the type of keto a lot of us think of that is really high in meat and bacon and processed oils, that red line was a significant risk of breast cancer. However, a healthy ketogenic dietary pattern was a green line. So this to me is really, really significant, because keto gets a bad rap. Keto strictly means that you are eating the majority of your calories from fat. It doesn't mean that you're eating them from bad fats. You can eat vegan keto. You can be eating your fat from olives and avocados and nuts and seeds and nut butter and olive oil, and you never have to touch butter or bacon or red meat at all. And that type of more plant-focused keto pattern is really protective of cancer, not the deep, dirty keto that's kind of become trendy here in the United States, which is interesting. The DASH pattern, DASH is a way of eating for hypertension. It's really Mediterranean style eating, more or less, and that was protective. Pro-inflammatory diet, which is more like the standard American diet, definitely increased risk. The prudent dietary pattern is one that they have in the Middle East that's more along the lines of the DASH in the Mediterranean. That was green. Paleo was a green line, and then plant-based was green and red. Now, how on earth does that happen? How do we have very protective and yet also very risky at the same time for plant-based, which we all hear we should absolutely eat if we have risk of cancer? It's because of how the plant-based diet was set up. So we can eat plant-based and be eating, like I said, avocados and olives and nuts and seeds and all these awesome vegetables and fruits. We can also eat plant-based and be eating veggie nuggets and French fries and fake meat burgers. Oreos are vegan. So you can eat this vegan plant-based style eating and be eating very, very unhealthfully. So I think it's really good to see this structure because so many of us have this label on plant-based as automatically healthy. And that's what fast food companies and processed food companies are sticking all over their labels because we think that way. But we need to dig a little bit deeper into the health of the food product and not just think, oh, it's plant-based. That plant-based is a very vague term, as we saw in the last slide. So we need to just kind of be really smart consumers. So what should our plate look like if we are eating plant-based or plant-powered, as I like to say, because plant-based is so confusing. And even we had a team retreat here at Wellness, and I asked everyone if they had dietary restrictions because I was going to buy lunch. And one of our people said, okay, I eat plant-based. And I said, do you eat plant-based vegan or do you eat plant-based other? And she said, oh, I eat dairy and fish. And I said, okay, so like just that kind of makes it confusing. So I don't use the term plant-based. I usually use the term plant-powered, meaning your diet, your intake, your meals are powered with plants. And maybe not, you sprinkle some animal foods in there. So this is how it should be set up. Half of the plate is produce, fruits, vegetables, plant foods that don't really provide a whole lot of protein or fat otherwise. So that produce section, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. I'm looking at the plate and not on my line of foods here. So the produce section, again, is 5 cups per day, mostly vegetables. Fruits definitely are great, but we don't want the majority of our plant intake from fruit because then we're not getting as much fiber. We'll jump back up to protein here. So the quarter of our plate is protein. Half to 75% of that should be plant protein. So legumes, beans, lentils, tofu, tempeh, that could even be plant protein powder if you wanted it to be. Lots of good options in the plant protein world. And then 25 to 50% of animal proteins, if you want to include animal proteins, but they should be high quality, meaning if you're eating a ruminant animal like cow or lamb or pork, it should be grass-fed. If it's poultry or eggs, it should be pasture-raised, because then you know that animal ate a plant-powered diet. So they are also in turn healthy. If an animal did not eat a plant-powered diet and was factory farmed and just basically eating standard American diet, processed foods, you're getting a very poor quality inflammatory animal product. So, you have to kind of balance that, but you absolutely can put some animal proteins into that section. And then the other quarter of the plate is kind of split into two between fats and starches. So your healthy fats, meaning primarily whole food fats, avocado instead of avocado oil, olives instead of olive oil. And then making sure that when you do have oils that they are cold pressed so that they are not oxidative, like that whole rusting process, and they're exposed to heat, then those two are inflammatory before you eat them. So you want the label to say cold pressed. And then your starch category should be low glycemic and unrefined, meaning whole food carbs, wild rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, peas, fruit can be in this category, but really trying to move away from the really processed carbs and keeping that, again, more of like an eighth of the plate. And when you are buying something processed, looking for at least 3 grams of fiber on the label per serving so that we're getting lots and lots of fiber here. And then flavor boosts are things that just make the whole meal taste good. So if you're going for a sauce, you want it to be unsweetened and using sea salts. So let's spend the rest of our time here going over how to do this. How do we put plant power into practice? Let's talk about food for the rest of our session together. So here's 5 of my favorite foods that really can be manipulated with lots of plant power. Excuse me. Oatmeal. How many of us eat oatmeal with oats and either water or milk and maybe some fruit on top and maybe some honey or other sweetener? Maybe sometimes we throw like a teaspoon of walnuts on top. Very carby, right? We're having carbs that are oats, carbs that are usually a honey or something, and then carbs from our fruit. And we're not balancing that out with, remember the plate, remember this plate image. Where's the protein? Where's the healthy fat? Where's the produce in that bowl? So an easy swap, not necessarily swap, but just add even, is add chia and flax seeds, lots of it. You get lots of omega-3s, you get lots of fiber, good plant phytonutrients from those. You can also top your oatmeal with nuts, even herbs, like a little bit of basil actually makes a huge flavor pop to your oatmeal, and you get a little bit of phytonutrient in that herb itself. Vegetables in your egg. So instead of just an egg scramble, can you add a bunch of roasted veggies to that? Add lots of color, all those carotenoids. Use pasture-raised eggs so that the egg is a high quality protein. And maybe we also put avocado to the side, because just 1 little quarter of an avocado has about 5 grams of fiber, which is awesome. Even hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are an amazing superfood because they're a complete protein in the plant world, and you only need about a tablespoon or 2, and they add a nice little crunch. When we're having a pasta dish, it can be plant-based vegan, but we need protein because most pastas are just sort of refined. So instead of getting regular pasta or brown rice pasta, get a legume pasta. So chickpea pasta or fava bean pasta or lentil pasta. My favorite right now is lupini bean pasta because lupini beans are so high in fiber. They're really low glycemic. So use one of those. So now we're getting high protein and high fiber in our pasta. And we add more vegetables, again, maybe hemp seed, maybe you make your own pesto with throwing in things like basil and spinach or arugula so that we're getting even more plants even from our sauce. We can make burgers, make them out of beans, so we're getting good lentil protein there, fiber protein there from the beans. Use a lettuce wrap instead of bread. Utilize big flavored sauces or things like salsas where there's lots of fruits and herbs on top. And then even in your desserts, think about how we can add some plant power to a dessert. If you blend up avocado or tofu with cocoa powder and a low glycemic sweetener, you can have an amazing chocolate pudding that tastes delicious and is plant powered. So let's go into some of my other favorite kind of secret hidden gems in the plant world. Some really cool things you can do with little effort that really create a huge plant-powered punch. Plant-powered punch. One is powdered citrus peel. We just throw away our orange peels and our lemon peels and our lime peels, right? Maybe some of us will zest them, which is a great way to get the antioxidants and the oils in the peel, because the peel itself is where all the vitamin C is. It's really concentrated there. Lots of antioxidants in the peel of citrus. Any citrus, by the way, it could be grapefruit too. There's also oils in there. So when you touch the outsides of lemons and oranges, you get that kind of filmy stuff on your fingers. That's oil. That's essential oil. And that oil helps you to absorb those antioxidants better. Also, the peels are bitter, which is why we don't bite into them. They're very, very bitter. They're a protective member of the plant itself. A lot of animals won't go through the peel because it tastes so bitter. So all those compounds of the peel significantly enhance our immune function, but we don't eat them unless, of course, again, we're zesting it a little bit, which is great, but a lot of us don't do that. We don't think to do it, or you're only using a very little bit of zest. Instead, we can dehydrate and pulverize our peels, and it makes the most amazing seasoning. So all you do is take your peels, put them all on a baking sheet, and set your oven to as low as it will go. For some people, that'll be 200. For some, it will be 250. Take off as much of the pith as you can and make sure you wash the peel really, really well. Lay them all on a baking sheet and bake for 4 to 6 hours until they're just crunchy. Put them all in a food processor and pulse until it's pulverized into a powder or very, very tiny crumbles. First of all, it smells amazing. I did this with my mandarins. Oh, it just smelled so good. Every time I open the jar, it smells so good. And you just, you put on maybe a half a teaspoon on top of your yogurt and your oatmeal, chia pudding, smoothies, and it really enhances the smell and the aroma and the flavor of that food. And you're getting just a ton of plant power from that. You can also throw like powdered orange or lime into your stir fries, use it as a seasoning overall, mix it into batters, maybe like pancake batter or muffins. I also really like to mix it into melted chocolate and then throw the melted chocolate in the freezer on a baking sheet and break it up like bark. And it's got like an orange chocolate vibe. So really great for dessert. So now we're having plant powered dessert again. You can do that exact same process with the peels of your alliums. So remembering that alliums are your onions, shallots, garlic, fennel, the underground bulbs that have that peel around them. Same thing as citrus. The peel is where the concentrated antioxidants are. It's also got a concentrated antioxidant that's called quercetin, which is not in a whole lot of plants other than alliums, and it's very good for our immune function. The peels of alliums are also really high in certain types of fibers, which are good for our digestive tract. They're insoluble fibers. But again, who's eating garlic peel and onion peel? No one. So you can do the same drying and dehydrating and pulverizing process. Again, wash them really, really well. You can even soak them if you want to. Remove any of the dirt, remove a sticker if it's on there. Put it at your oven at the lowest setting. And the only difference is you're not baking as long because these peels are so thin. You don't need 4 to 6 hours. You need 2 to 3. And again, once they're crunchy, put it in a food processor, pulverize it up. And guess what? You just made onion powder, garlic powder. That's all you're doing here is making just really, really fresh and powerful onion, garlic, fennel, shallot powder. So you can use this on your roasted veggies, in your soups and stocks, in your dressings and sauces, anywhere where you would add those as seasonings in your eggs for extra flavor and extra antioxidant capacity. Another thing you can do with these peels, by the way, if you're like, I am not taking 2 to 3 hours of my time to dehydrate onion peel, you can also save them in your freezer in a Ziploc baggie and toss them into a broth whenever you're making broth, and they'll just save them up until you're ready to make a broth. Herbs and teas are also super plant foods, in my opinion, because you have this really concentrated source in the tiny, teeny leaves, and then we infuse them into water. So instead of having to eat and digest and break down and metabolize that food substance, we're putting all of the good stuff for our immune system into a liquid and then drinking that liquid in the form of a tea. And in the form of herbs themselves, you get a lot concentrated in a very little amount. Those tiny little leaves have all the nutrition that also the kale does. So you don't have to eat as much of it, and you can add it to things rather than having to gnaw on something. So I just find herbs and teas are great because they're easier to digest and absorb the nutrition, but they're also a little bit easier to actually eat. Especially if we're picky or we have maybe a low appetite or we're in a rush and I don't have time to eat a whole salad. Well, I can get still a lot of nutrition from sprinkling in some basil. So you get these concentrated polyphenols and antioxidants. Again, both of these substances, the herbs and the teas, have those oils kind of like the outer lining of the citrus. So that helps us to absorb the nutrients better. They have lots of fiber in them. You're not getting the fiber when you make tea, but you do when you eat the herbs. They have medicinal properties. Both herbs and teas are known for being able to aid certain things. So things like ginger will help with digestion. Things like thyme and rosemary can help with nasal and with immune function in general. Garlic is known to ward off vampires, right? Hydrating and energizing. So especially in the form of tea, you're not only getting antioxidants, but you're also hydrating your cells so that they can actually use those antioxidants better. You can satisfy cravings because they're so flavorful, especially dried herbs and some of the sweeter teas. If you're having a sweet craving, you can have a sweeter tasting tea and often help to quell that craving. So you're going to get this power whether it's fresh, frozen, or dried, but do mind the expiration dates. I can't even tell you how many times I tell people go in your pantry and look at the expiration dates of your herbs, and it's like 4 years old. They do lose that power when they're exposed to air, light, and heat, just like oils do. So if you're not sure, do the smell test. If you can't tell what it is by smelling it, it's probably too old. It should have a powerful smell. And just for your own reference, 1/2 teaspoon of a dried herb is about 1 teaspoon fresh when it comes to recipes. More super plants are seeds and sprouts. So consider the broccoli plant, right? You have all this nutrition that grew into this huge broccoli plant. But where did it come from? It came from that one little seed. That one little seed had all of the nutrition of the entire broccoli plant in the one little seed. So it's super, super, super concentrated in all of that nutrition. And right when it sprouts is right when a lot of those antioxidants and polyphenols are activating into their active form. Because when it's a seed, it's dormant. So it's still powerful. There's still a lot of fiber there, but they're not active. It's not actively growing. And right when it starts to sprout, you have all that concentrated nutrition still, but it's all being activated. And so that's why the seeds and the sprouts are so much more concentrated in nutrition than the actual plant itself, which can be really empowering if you are someone, again, who doesn't have much of an appetite, you're picky, maybe you have IBS and you really can't handle high volumes of fiber. You can get so much plant nutrition by eating little amounts of sprouts and seeds of these plant foods. So sprouts and seeds of the crucifers, of the alliums, of the legumes. They're very digestible, and they also give you some protein, which is nice. So the way that you can sprout any type of seed or legume is you rinse them off. So let's say you're going to sprout some lentils. You rinse them off, get them nice and clean, put them in a jar or a bowl covered with water, and then cover that bowl with a cloth, like a dishcloth, overnight. The next morning, you drain them through a sieve, rinse, put them back in the bowl with no water, let them sit overnight, and you do that drain, rinse, repeat with no water, couple of days in a row, 4 or 5, until you start to see just the barely sprout of the lentil come in, and then you use the lentils as you normally would. You can make soup out of them, you turn them into a hummus, into a lentil burger, you throw them in your salad, and you're getting just a much higher dose of polyphenols from that process. The other thing I want to say about seeds is because of their power, we want to get them a lot. So about 2 tablespoons per day of any type of seed, flax, chia, hemp, pumpkin, or pepita seeds, sunflower seeds, really aim for that. Sauces are another way to get plant power without having to eat cups and cups and cups and cups of vegetables. Because you can, again, mix all these types of powerful foods into a smaller concentrated amount and then put that on top of other things. So you can consolidate high plant volume into a small portion. You can use lots of other plants, maybe that you don't love the taste of as much. Like, let's say you're just not into bitter arugula quite yet. You haven't gotten there. You could blend it into a chimichurri or a pesto along with other flavors, get the nutrition of that arugula and not have to eat the bitter quite yet. You also combine fats and other antioxidants for better absorption. When you're making a sauce, you're usually putting in some olive oil or something like that's going to help you absorb it better. And you just make things taste better when you make sauces. So a good formula for any sauce is choose 1 cup of herbs, 1 to 2 cups of either vegetables or sprouts, 1 to 2 tablespoons of any allium, so garlic, shallot, onion, a 1/4 cup of citrus or vinegar, so citrus meaning like lemon juice, a 1/4 cup of nuts or seeds, and 1 cup of oil or broth, depending on how much fat you want to add. If you kind of follow this formula and you pick and choose, so let's say we're choosing 1 cup of a mixture of rosemary and basil with 2 cups of roasted bell peppers, a tablespoon of garlic powder, a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar, a 1/4 cup of hemp seeds, and maybe a mix of 1/2 cup broth and 1/2 cup olive oil. That's going to be this yummy red roasted bell pepper sauce spread type of thing. So you can kind of mix and match and come up with your own. So ideas would be pesto, chimichurri, red bell pepper spread, tzatziki, peanut sauce, tahini, guacamole, hummus, or marinara. You can make all these things and just throw in the good plants. Broth is one of my favorite ways to get plant power into your body, because you can put anything in there. You can literally put anything into a broth, especially foods that you just don't have the palate for yet. The other great thing about broth is that you just drink it. You could sip on it. It's very comforting. You can make a soup out of it. You don't have to chew and digest, and you control the flavor of it. So you get a lot of polyphenols, phytonutrients, antioxidants. Anything you put in that pot is going to leach into the liquid. So if you ever made your own broth and after it's done, you pull out a carrot and try and chew on it, it tastes like nothing because all of the nutrition has gone into the liquid. It can be a good place to try and get some of these things like alliums and herbs, roots, peels, all the stuff that we're maybe not eating so much of. So when I'm chopping throughout the week, I'm chopping carrots, I'm chopping broccoli just for dinners. Any offcuts, the stems, the peels, the leaves, I throw into Ziploc bags in my freezer and I dump them all into a broth when I'm ready to make my broth. If you're using bones in your broth to make a bone broth as opposed to a vegetable broth, you're going to get all the collagen and glycine from that bone, so that's very healing. You're going to enhance your hydration and your detoxification processes by the fact that this is a liquid form of plant power, and it's very absorbable because it's liquid. You don't have to do any digesting. So this is my kind of formula in general for a good broth, and basically lots of veggies, lots of herbs, throw in a marrow bone or a chicken carcass and add any bonus stuff like seaweed or turmeric or mushrooms that you might want for your own health. Let it simmer for 24 hours on low in a crock pot, or I put mine in an Instant Pot, and strain and use and keep them in your freezer. The other thing I'll suggest to you with using especially homemade broths is think outside the box of soups. You can sip on it. You can also use it in place of water for any type of cooking. So cooking rice, cooking pasta, cooking legumes, making sauces. Use it as the liquid because then you're getting nutrition there and it makes it taste way better. Jasmine rice cooked in broth is way better than jasmine rice cooked in water. Fermented veggies are amazing because you get probiotics. So not only do we get the fiber and the nutrient of the cabbage or whatever is being fermented, but we also now get a probiotic effect, which is good for our gut and good for our immune system. In eating fermented veggies, you also have the fiber component, which is also going to feed your probiotics. So those probiotics are live bugs. They have to eat something. When they eat fiber, they keep being good bugs, and they're very easily digestible. So examples are sauerkraut, kimchi, or other pickled veggie combos. There's so many veggie combos out there now because it became very trendy. So I love the beet kraut that is in this picture, kind of bottom right, second in. It's so good because it has a slight sweetness to it. So you can add it in salads, in slaws. If you're making, a slaw to go along with your tacos, throw in some sauerkraut in there. Put it on top of your burgers, stir fry, appetizer trays, put some fermented pickle. That doesn't have to be a slaw. It can be just like good pickles that have been fermented. If you hate the taste of these, trust me on this, you can add 1 tablespoon of plain unsweetened kraut into a smoothie. And as long as you have all the other good flavors of smoothie in there, you will never know that 1 tablespoon was in there. You can also use the brine. So once I finish up my pickles or my kraut, I keep that liquid, the brine that's in there, and I use that in sauces, in dressings. When I'm breading anything, I dip it in that and then dip it in the breading because you have all that power in the liquid too. And this is my last little tip for food is parboiling your starches. So you can do this with rice. You can do this with any type of potato. You can also do this with legumes. It takes a little bit longer. But what you do by basically pre-cooking and then chilling and then cooking again your starches is you change the structure of the fiber itself to be insoluble. And what this means is now this starch is much more fibrous and you have a lower glycemic index. So instead of your potato spiking your blood sugar up to let's say eating a potato spikes your blood sugar to 140, it would potentially only spike it to maybe 115. So there are studies that show by parboiling our starches, we can cut the glycemic index by up to 50%, which is really, really powerful. You also, because the antioxidants aren't bound up by those types of fibers anymore, you get a better antioxidant availability. So you get more of the antioxidants available to your body. So how do you do this? You take your potatoes, you put them into a pot of boiling water like you would to do your regular cooking of them, but you only let them cook a few minutes till they are kind of barely pokeable with a fork. So they're still not soft enough to where you want to eat them, but they are soft enough to poke really easily. So for a regular potato, this is probably 5 to 7 minutes. But if you're parboiling, let's say peas, this is only going to take about 2 to 3 minutes. So you parboil them until just soft, take them out of the water, drain them, put them into an ice bath to completely chill them and stop the cooking process. And then you just chill them in your fridge until you're ready to cook with them. So maybe that's tomorrow and you cut them up and you roast them. And now those roasted potatoes have half the glycemic index. So you're getting this much more powerful plant food by just in how you prepare it. All right, so that brings us to our time for questions. But here are the takeaways I want you to walk away with today is one, that plants have a lot of magical powers to them. They're so incredible for the immune system, but we do have to eat them to get those powers. So how do we eat them? We eat at least 5 cups of produce a day. 3 different colors, leaning on the bitter, the allium, and the crucifers, right? Remembering that there are lots of sources of plants. So don't just think about vegetables, think about beans and nuts and seeds. And plant-based does not have to mean you eliminate any type of food at all. If you don't want to eliminate meat, you don't have to. You can still eat plant-powered and look at the quality of your animal proteins. And lastly, have fun. Have fun, like my Vivian daughter right there. She's 4 years old now, but that was her when she was just learning to eat solids, and she just had fun with it. We forget to have fun with our foods, and we're so focused on how to cook it, and or if we cook them at all, that really, if we're not having fun in the kitchen, we're losing a big piece of it as well. So those are my takeaways for you. I am going to close out our recording, and then I'll get to our chat. Not letting me in recording, so we'll just keep on recording. Okay, I'm going to pull up the chat here. So if you have questions, please pop them in. I'll go through them from the beginning. Any food combinations we should avoid? Not. So all I can really think of for the answer to this is really your carbohydrates. We don't want to eat carbohydrates alone because that will spike our blood sugar. You always want to eat a carbohydrate with protein, with fat, or with more fiber. So instead of just an apple, have it with cheese, have it with some peanut butter. Instead of a bowl of rice, have that rice with some tofu, with some chicken, with avocado, guacamole. Those are combinations. We always want to be thinking of a combination and not just a carbohydrate. As far as different types of foods, not really anything you need to avoid, with the exception of there are always medications and conditions that have some specifics around them. But for a general population, it's much more about combining the different colors and types of foods than it is about avoiding combinations. So for example, iron is more well absorbed when we have it with vitamin C. So instead of just having an egg with tomatoes and bell pepper is going to be better absorbed for your iron. So that combination is better. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's see. What a great presentation. Thank you. Super helpful. Oh, hold on. Let me drag this down. Quick question. I like roasted veggies. Does the way you prepare veggies make a difference in getting the full impact of nutrients, or the idea to eat them raw? Such a good question, Francis. The answer is they're both. You have certain nutrients in the raw form of all plant foods and certain nutrients in the cooked form, because cooking does activate certain forms. It also does deactivate certain forms of certain nutrients. So my favorite example is lycopene. That lycopene in the tomato is not activated until that tomato is cooked. So a tomato sauce has active lycopene for your eyes versus a raw tomato does not. Now, that being said, we've killed off some of the vitamin C from the raw tomato when we cook it. So a raw tomato has way more vitamin C than the tomato sauce does. So my answer to your question is try and eat a variety of raw and cooked fruits and vegetables throughout your week so that you get a good variety of all of it. But there is no real food I can think of that like you have to always eat raw versus you have to always eat cooked. It's just trying to find a good balance. And when you do cook things, try not to cook them to a char, because then we do kill off a lot of the nutrients and we create some of that reactive oxidant species, the ROS or the free radicals, when we're, grilling and roasting and broiling to a blackened state. Then we're getting some downsides there. I love the idea of making powders and peels. How long should we bake them in the oven? So it depends on how thick or thin they are. The really thin onion and garlic peels that are more like paper, 2 to 3 hours, depending on if you're at 2 to 250 degrees. The thicker peels of the oranges, lemons, limes, tangerines, these are going to take more like 4 to 6 hours. Last time I did tangerine peels, I want to say it was about 5 hours. It was right in the middle, and my oven goes to 215. That's the lowest it'll go, and it took about 5 hours until they were just really, really crunchy. And it'll last for a really long time too, which is also a benefit as opposed to zesting, because zesting, it's still a fresh food. When they're powdered, you can just put them in your pantry in a jar. Wonderful, Priest. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any plant-based protein powders you recommend? There's so many good ones and there's so many bad ones. And that is in plant-based protein powder world and whey and animal protein powder world. There's good and there's bad. What I will say to look for specifically on plant protein powders is that there is a variety of sources. So instead of just pea protein, which is really popular and dominant in the plant protein powder world, look for a combined source. So maybe it's pea protein and hemp protein and fava bean protein. Like look for 2 or 3 different types of source of protein in the ingredient list rather than just one. One, you're going to get a more complete protein that way because there's very few plant proteins that have all complete amino acids. But also, whenever there's just one, you know that there's a lot of mono farming involved. So peas are a good example of there's so much monocropping of peas because peas you can do a lot with that now peas have become kind of deficient in a lot of their nutrient because we're just monocropping them everywhere and they're being sprayed with pesticides and all that. So it's not good for the environment. So look for a couple different sources and then look for if it's sweetened, what it's sweetened with. Is it sweetened with an artificial sweetener? Is it sweetened with some monk fruit or allulose, which would be preferable, or the best preference would be not sweetened at all. That being said, a couple brands I like are Garden of Life. Sun Warrior is another good one. And Nutiva is another good one. But there's more out there. Those are just the 3 that I see a lot that I like. Do the peels need to be organic or just washed well? Washed well. That's the key. Organic is great because we're not spraying things with pesticides. That being said, you know, you're still getting a lot of amazing benefit in a non-organic food. And so just make sure you wash them really well, especially onions and garlic, because you can literally see some of the dirt on there sometimes. So you might even want to do a soak. Speaking of protein powders, are they necessary if one is mainly WFPB? Luz, you're going to have to tell me what WFPB is. I'm sure once you type it in, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, but it's not coming to mind. But just to start answering your question, protein powders. Oh, whole food plant-based. Thank you. Yes, clearly that's what that means. It's not necessary for anyone. You can eat lovely without ever having powders involved. I will say if you are not eating animal proteins, and especially if you're fully vegan and not eating egg either, it can be hard to reach your protein needs if you're not very careful and very aware. And if you also are a big exerciser, it can be really hard. So protein powders make life easier, but are they necessary? No, you just have to really be aware of what you're eating, and you're probably going to be eating large amounts of legumes, of tofu and tempeh, because that's going to be your biggest source there of protein. So yeah, powders can make life easier. They're not absolutely necessary at all. It really just depends on what your protein needs are, how active you are, and what other sources of protein you can get. Looks like I made it through to the end. Oh, formula to determine how much protein is needed. So the typical guideline recommendation is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. There is a lot of argument in the nutrition and in the medical world of that probably being too low of a number for most people, especially as we age and we start to lose our bone mass and muscle mass, especially if you're active. So how I usually calculate for my clients is 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. That will be your needs. And you can get much more specific with some of that depending on, again, your activity level or various types of conditions you might be looking at. But I usually use that because 0.8, while that is the guideline, is pretty low and really is more of a to prevent deficiency than to promote optimal nutrition. So 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Is there an amount of plant powder that equates to 1 serving of vegetables? It kind of depends on the vegetable and what that vegetable is. I'm just thinking of herbs being, about half-ish. So about half a teaspoon of powdered is about 1 teaspoon of whole. So that's kind of the guideline I go in, where it's like a half serving of the volume of that powdered food is equal to that whole serving. It might be actually even a little bit less than that now that I think about, like, if you saute spinach, a whole bag condenses down to what, a quarter to a half of a cup. So you might be able to get away with like a quarter of the ratio. So 1 to 4 being the ratio of the powdered to whole food. Hopefully that made sense. Okie dokie, everybody. Looks like I made it through. So I will wrap up here. This recording will be available soon, probably in a day or two. Might be Monday, given that the weekend is straight ahead. I will also send out the slides to anyone who is registered. If you were not registered or you don't get these slides from me by Monday, please reach out to me and email me. Our email at St. Jude has been a little wacky with doing bounce backs, especially for Yahoo and SBC Global emails. So a lot of you email me that you never got them, and it's just because I couldn't actually send it to you. So please email me if you do not get these slides by Monday or if you can't find the recording, and we will make sure we get those to you. And yes, the chat is recorded, but I don't think it actually shows up on the recording. Nancy, I actually don't know the answer to that. I'll have to re-look at a recording and see if the chat pops up or not. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for joining us. We have an in-person seminar here at the Wellness Center next week on gut health with Lynn, our dietitian, and more virtual stuff on our events and programs and events page and for our Mount SAC friends. So hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.